Hi everyone, welcome back to EndisEnglishNotes.com, where today we're going to look at Sestina by Elizabeth Bishop. Okay, just again we'll reiterate a bit of background on Elizabeth Bishop. As we know, her father died at a very young age, aged 5 or 6. Her mother was committed to a mental institution. She never saw her again after that. That biographical information is really important when we're discussing this poem. Okay, the poem Sestina is... there are 6 stanzas of 6 lines. At the end of each of the lines, there are 6 words. And throughout the 6th stanza, the same words are repeated throughout. The words are house, grandmother, child, stove, almanac, and tears. So there's a house with a grandmother and a child, a stove and an almanac, and tears. Critics would suggest that the real structure and order of this poem is an attempt by Bishop to put a bit of order on the chaos that was her life. We'll see that restrictive nature in terms of the same words repeated, and that is also used at the end of the poem when the young girl is drawing the houses, as we'll show. They're very square houses, very restrictive, very structured. So it's an attempt by Bishop to put a bit of structure on a life that lacked structure. Okay, September rain falls on the house. In the failing light, the old grandmother sits in the kitchen with the child beside the little marble stove, reading the jokes from the almanac, laughing and talking to hide her tears. Now, it's only when we get to the end of the poem, or end of the verse, that we realise there's tears, that it looks like a very happy domestic situation here, but the last word, tears, makes us go back and reevaluate. September rain, okay, the failing light, the old grandmother sits in the kitchen with the child beside the little marble stove, reading the jokes from the almanac, laughing and talking to hide her tears. There is a suggestion that something sad has happened here. As we know, Bishop had to live with her grandmother because her mother and father her father was dead and her mother was unable to look after her. So she's just setting the scene with that. Okay, so we have the little marble stove and the almanac. So 2 important features in the poem. She thinks that her equinoctial tears and the rain that beats on the roof of the house were both foretold by the almanac. An almanac was like a book, an annual book that would have come out, would have had star signs and would have stories and jokes, and would have maybe told the future. And she thinks that the tears and the rain that beats off the house, she compares those to tears, that they were foretold by the almanac, so that her future was foretold, that this sadness was foretold, but only known to a grandmother. The iron kettle sings on the stove. Now, personifies the kettle there. The iron kettle sings on the stove. Also, there's a bit of sibilance there. She cuts some bread and says to the child, "It's time for tea now." But the child is watching the tea kettle's small, hard tears. Okay, so the kettle, if I'm sure you've seen a kettle, when it starts to steam, it releases water. So she's comparing that to tears. Dance like mad on the hot black stove. Now, dance like mad. Okay, quite a poignant phrase there when we consider that Bishop's mother was committed to a mental institution. Okay, the word mad there. So the tears dance like mad on the hot black stove, the way the rain must dance on the house. Tidying up, the old grandmother hangs up the clever almanac. Now, it's putting the almanac in a position of power, I suppose. It's putting the almanac up high, so she hangs it up on its string. Okay, so the almanac's kind of hovering over, and she's going to continue bird-like. So there's a sense that the almanac is bird-like. It's hovering around the room. The almanac hovers half open above the child. There is something threatening about that. Okay, the almanac is personified here. Okay, it's bird-like. It hovers over the child in a threatening manner. Hovers above the old grandmother and her teacup full of dark brown tears. Again, the repetition of tears. Again, the repetition of... it's not just tea she's drinking dark brown tears. She shivers and says she thinks the house feels chilly and puts more wood in the stove. Okay, SSS here. Sibilance again. Okay. It was to be, says the marble stove. Now, again, personification. Both the almanac and the stove are personified here. So it was to be, says the marble stove. I know what I know, says the Almanac. So it's basically saying that Bishop's troubles were foretold, that they knew it was going to happen. Okay, so there's a sense here that the Almanac is not just predicting the future, that maybe it's dictating the future. With crayons, the child draws a rigid house. Now the house, I'm sure you've all created square houses with square windows and square doors when you were younger, and a winding pathway. Now that's quite symbolic there. The winding pathway, does it represent Bishop's the journey she has went on to find home? That it's a winding journey where you don't know what's ahead of you. Okay, it's not a simple going home like other people have. Okay, then the child puts in a man with buttons like tears and shows it proudly to the grandmother. Buttons again, buttons like tears. But secretly, while the grandmother busies herself above the stove, the little moons fall down like tears from between the pages of the Almanac into the flower bed the child has carefully placed in the front of the house. So it's as if the Almanac has purposely placed the tears, okay, when the grandmother wasn't looking, okay. So the grandmother, well, she's busy. The Almanac is hanging up like a bird, and it's dropping tears into the little girl's house. Time to plant tears, says the Almanac. There's something very sinister there. Okay, it's planting tears. Now, when you plant something, you expect it to grow and be used in future. The grandmother sings to the marvellous stove, and the child draws another inscrutable house. Okay, so is Bishop saying that the Almanac planted these tears and foretold all the bad things that would happen in her life? Okay, so quite a strange poem, very structured, 6 stanzas of 6 lines, as a sestina. All the words, the last words of each line must be repeated continuously throughout. And in the last verse, we have all the words again. We have the tears, we have Almanac, we have stove, house, child, and grandmother. Okay, so points to consider there. This is an adult poet reflecting on the troubled childhood and the desire for security of home. So she didn't have that security. There's a disturbing, sinister tone and a sense of inevitability. It was as if this was always going to happen. It was inevitable that these bad things were going to happen. The tears were planted. It was inevitable that bad things would happen because they were planted. The personification, you should remember the stove and the Almanac, continuously personified in a sinister way. Okay, the tear imagery patterns emphasize sorrow-filled scene. The strict form of Sestina contains and controls overflowing emotions. Okay, there's a sense there that she's not going to be overwhelmed by this emotion. She must use order to restrict the emotion in her life. Okay, think of the imagery she uses and the metaphorical language throughout. Okay, so that's a quick revision video of Sestina. You will have done it in class. I normally say this at the start. So this is just a revision guide for you and use for your essays, your mocks, or your leaving cert. For more notes, go to endasEnglishNotes.com. And if you'd like more videos on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. Thank you.